والأرض مددناها وألقينا فيها رواسي وأنبتنا فيها من كل شيء موزون وجعلنا لكم فيها معايش ومن لستم له برازقين وإن من شيء إلا عندنا خزائنه وما ننزله إلا بقدر معلوم وأرسلنا الرياح لواقح فأنزلنا من السماء ماء فأسقيناكموه وما أنتم له بخازنين وإنا لنحن نحيي ونميت ونحن الوارثون ولقد علمنا المستقدمين منكم ولقد علمنا المستأخرين وإن ربك هو يحشرهم إنه حكيم عليم صدق الله العظيم.
Just before we begin, a little intro into Sidi Fazlun. Sidi Fazlun Khalid has a worldwide reputation as an indefatigable advocate of environmental protection rooted in religion, and is now recognized as one of the 15 leading eco-theologians in the world. He appeared on the Independent on Sunday list of the top 100 environmentalists in the UK in 2008, and is also listed amongst the 500 most influential Muslims in the world by the Royal Islamic Strategic Studies Centre of Jordan. Since the mid-1980s, he has devoted his energies to promoting Islamic environmentalism in both its theological and practical manifestations. He founded the Islamic Foundation for Ecology and Environmental Sciences, which is now established as the world's leading Islamic environmental NGO. And tomorrow is the final talk of our Discover Islam Week. It's by Sister Mariam Francois at same time again here at 6 o'clock, and we'll also have Sheikh Idris Watts leading Jum'ah tomorrow at 1 o'clock in the Riley Smith Hall. Jazakallah khairan. I'll pass it over to Sadiq.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. How much time have we got?
You've got an hour, inshallah.
And then questions?
Yeah, you can have questions after. It's up to you, Sheikh.
Okay. Can you stand to hear me for an hour? All right, we'll do our best. The thing is, when I make journeys like this to talk to people on the environment, I'm always conscious of the fact that in spite of everything I do, I'm also part of the problem. Because I have to drive from the Midlands to get here, as a result of which I've contributed my little bit to polluting the environment. The point I'm making here is that all of us, I think every single living being on this planet, have no choice in the matter. Either you are part of the problem or you are part of the solution. Because this is uniquely one single event in human history where you can say that every single one of us, and I say without exception, contributed to where we are today in terms of the degradation of the environment. That is uncontestable. You are all part of the problem. We are all part of the problem. Equally, we can also be part of the solution. But it doesn't seem to me that this aspect of what we could do to alleviate the environmental problems we ourselves caused can in fact be, in our own way, in our little way, be put right. Or also so that should ring a few bells. We have in fact lost that connection. We have a conscious connection that every single human being is part of the environment. In fact, we are nature. We are part of the nature. We are part of nature. And we have lost that. It does not enter our consciousness unless somebody tells you. You see? And that stems from uniquely the first wahi that came to Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord who created. Created what? Created you. And created everything else that we are a part of. Is that consciousness, we like to listen to darses of the Quran, great scholars will come and I salute them for the depth of knowledge that they have, expound what the Quranic knowledge and the Hadith knowledge and the Seerah and so on and so on and so on. But I challenge the ulama on this aspect, the very basic of teaching, that you are in fact part of Allah's creation and that you are interlocked irrevocably into this creational process does not enter the consciousness of anybody, leave alone Muslims. So we are then free to act as agents outside that, and then mount an unmitigated assault on the rest of nature so that we can better ourselves. In fact, let me go straight to the point. University institutions are about that, so that we can all get the degrees and the knowledge that we have and go out and get a job, so that we can earn more, so that we can be better consumers. Or what else is there? Why on here? See, I'm putting all these challenging ideas for you to think about, because this institution, or these institutions, are places of thought and thinking. And I'm prompted to draw your attention to somebody I've been following for some years now. Professor David Orr of Fazlun Khalid, Ohio. He said a few years ago that the greatest polluters are people with MAs, BAs, PhDs, LLDs, and people with professional qualifications, by simple virtue of the fact that because of their higher qualifications, they get better jobs, they have better consumer levels, and therefore they can be better. They are better polluters. So bear that in mind. And also, you need now to project yourself out there and say, well, what is this kind of society we are getting educated to serve in? Where is this going? Because also, I'm also conscious, or you come to this lecture, you probably know something about it, that the whole scenario, climate change, environmental degradation, is almost terminal. The kind of language that comes out of the United Nations reports, terminal. You see, so that in a sense is the background of where we are and what we are at and what this whole thing is about. The location of yourself. So I'm not here just to give you, just to tell you, I'm a leading environmentalist, we have got a great organization, so on and so on and so on. It's getting to think about what is really going on, and it's quite profoundly, you're profoundly involved in it, whether you like it or not. Because other people make decisions for you, and these decisions have got you somewhere. And so that if I leave here with something at the end of an hour or two, by getting you thinking, what can I do about this? Where am I? Then I think I have partially succeeded. Also, I can also tell you from my own experience that people of my age, I quote Harold Macmillan when he was Prime Minister of this country in the 1960s. He said, "You never had it so good. You never had it so good." That, in a sense, is true. That is true for people of my generation, because post-war, after the massive thing that happened in Europe and the Far East, the post-war generation, post-beverage, people students studying social science will know who Beveridge is. He started the welfare state. The growth of industrial production, the growth of wealth, the expansion of the welfare society, cradle to grave welfare society, all this kind of thing. My generation never had it so good. We lived that. We lived that. Now, it's a different story. You are going to be faced with something utterly and totally different. And if you've been following the news, what's going on, the Prime Minister saying we are going to cut back, that as an aging population, again, I'm part of the problem, aging population, we've got to survive this, the basis on which to finance the aging population is shrinking, young people are coming up, there are no jobs for them, so the industrial society is in decline. What do we do about this? That again is the scenario that you need to be conscious of, if you're not already, you see, because I fear for my grandchildren. From now on, it's going to be tightening the belts. For us, it was expanding, putting a few extra holes in my belt because we were getting stouter and fatter. Now for you, it's got to pull your belts tighter because you'll be forced to do this. Tell you, that is the scenario. So, that's the background. In the 16th century, when Shakespeare was prolifically writing all his plays, in one of his works called As You Like It, he said this: "All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances and so on. The whole world is a stage, and we are its players." And if you look at it in that, have that image in your head. And on the stage, what do I get now? I switched the television on. What do you get? A whole day of Whitney Houston. She's gone. Her funeral's on Saturday. Great voice. I like her singing, but that's it. She's taken the front stage. Whitney Houston, Whitney, she's gone. Great pop star. Drugs. Booze. Lifestyle. That's one of the playlists that's playing up on the stage. Then you look a little harder, then there's another thing playing up which I call the Greek tragedy. The Greeks have overdone their access to the banks, and they are suffering as a result. If you've been watching the news, you know what's going on. The whole of the Eurozone is collapsing. People have been forced to tighten their belts, so they're rioting, they're burning, they're pillaging. People don't like it. So they've had it good until 3-4 years ago. They've been endlessly borrowing, increasing their industrial production, improving their lifestyles. Now, chickens are coming home to roost. Then you go back a little bit, and then you get more serious news about famine in Somalia. Hundreds and thousands of people having to uproot themselves from the lands that they've been used to ploughing and tilling and living in, and then having to go to refugee camps, being looked after by UNHCR, the refugee agencies. And So at the same time, we look at this thing being played out on the stage, and hear things like, there is an expedition being mounted to look for life on one of the moons of Jupiter. I can't make sense of this. So you see, people at one level are sending probes to find life on one of the moons of Jupiter, while down here, people are starving and dying. Again, there's something that I can, maybe you can, I can't make sense of this. But the point is, all this is going on the top of the stage, but look at what's going on underneath the stage, which people are not, some people are conscious of, people experience it every day, but cannot really make the connections between what is going on. I'm talking about the weather. I'm talking about global warming. And this is something that people don't look at. It's underneath, going on underneath. I'll tell you a little bit about it, because this is about the environment. Are there any environmental students here? Are there ecologists, people studying environment? No one? You are, okay. You probably know some of the things I'm going to tell you. The pre-industrial figure for parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere was 280. That's the standard figure, 280 parts per million. The current level is 392. And the scenario is that if we don't control carbon emissions, it'll increase to about 500 by the year 2050. So the current levels are higher than at any time in the past 800,000 years. Possibly, scientists say, higher than at any time in the past 20 million years. So there's a huge time gap. Scientists are not sure whether it's 800,000, 1 million years or 20 million years. But that's the scenario. And the whole idea about who's aware of what happened in Durban in early December? Does Durban early December, does COP17 make any sense to you? COP17? Okay, it's under the stage, you see. COP17 is, COP just means Conference of Parties. 17 means the number of conferences they've had. Conference of Parties 17. And what they're trying to do in Durban was one of umpteen numbers of meetings they've had to try and find a successor to the Kyoto Protocol. Kyoto Protocol makes sense to anybody? Yes? Yeah? Okay, good. Now, they need a successor. In fact, Kyoto Protocol expires this year, but they couldn't get one. Because the developed and the developing industrial countries did their best to try and, if not abort, try and decelerate or try and stop the process of dealing with issues related to climate change. Because why? Why? Because they wanted to, they didn't want any impediments for their industrial development. The Americans didn't want any development to what they call their growth. Growth. Important word, that growth. And the BRIC countries, who knows what the BRIC countries are? The BRIC countries? BRIC countries? Any ideas what the BRIC countries are? 2, 3 hands up, okay. Brazil, Russia, India, China. They are the new tigers, the new developing economies. Followed close on their heels by Indonesia, South Africa, Turkey, countries like that, who all want industrial development. Now, these countries are reluctant to curb carbon dioxide emissions. Why? Because that will mean reducing industrial production, which also means there will be no progress, there will be no prosperity there'll be no growth. These are all buzzwords. Progress, prosperity, growth in the economic thing. They're all buzzwords. Please remember them. Get them into your consciousness in a very real way. So, what we have had since the 18th century Industrial Revolution, which started in the Midlands, to be more exact, Birmingham in England, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. Now we've come 200, 250 years, and now we are facing a situation where there has been uncontrolled growth in industrial production, and where people are trying to now reduce carbon emissions, in fact to try and stop climate change. The figure is 2 degrees centigrade. Kyoto Protocol, COP 15, 16, 17 is all about trying to control the increase of global warming by 2 degrees centigrade, ostensibly by 2015. But they're not going to do it. They will not do it. Because we all want to progress. We all want industrial development. We all want to increase our living standards. And the developed countries, the developing countries, the BRIC countries don't want to do it. Everybody wants to. But who can blame them? But this is the mindset. This is the way we are going. This is the way that society has been constructed. This is why you are here. This is why you are at university studying. Because you all want a piece of that cake. You all want that kind of material advances that everybody is looking for. You know, I'm not pointing a finger at you, because this is the way it is. But you need to look at that scenario again. And if they don't do that, then the scenario is that it's game over. There will be the feedback effect, and after that there will be uncontrollable changes. It will take, it might not take 50 years, probably take 200 years to get back to a more stable level of pollution, of control of the greenhouse effect. The International Energy Agency, IEA, reputedly a conservative organization, they put out a report just before the COP17 process in Durban, in order to get the ear of the negotiators, that if by 2017 they do not, the world community cannot control the rise in global warming by 2 degrees centigrade, then it's almost, I wouldn't say terminal, that's too alarmist, but it'll be gone past the tipping point. It'll be difficult to control. See? I haven't used phrases like the religious phraseology, Yawm al-Akhir. I haven't used that here. You know? Forget about that for the time being. I'm talking about scientists. I'm talking about world scientists who are saying this. So, but at the same time, there is this opposing tendency to say, no, we don't want to hear that, but we want to go forward. So, but global warming, you see, and parts per million of carbon dioxide increased from 280 pre-industrial revolution now to over 350, possibly getting to 500 by 2050. Is a magic. I won't be here. I won't be here. Again, I keep saying I worry about my grandchildren. So that's only one manifestation. But what about the other stuff? Global warming is about atmospheric pollution. What about terrestrial pollution? What about pollution in the sea? What about global warming in the sea, which is, what's the word for it? Acidifying the coral reefs. What happens to the fish that we are supposed to be eating? And talking about fish, overfishing, it's all part of the same problem. There was a television program about fishermen in the west coast of Africa. They can't fish. There's no fish. Why? Because international trawlers come from all over the world and hoover up the fish in the ocean and take it back to their processing plants in whatever countries they've come from. It could be South Korea, it could be Japan, it could be one of the Scandinavian countries. You see? And they call it the capitalist model of production. All these things are connected. There is nothing that is not connected. Everything is connected. What happens to the fishermen is connected to ozone layer pollution. What happens to foresters in Indonesia is connected to your kitchen sink, whether you like it or not. You can't get away from it. So then you have the threat to biodiversity. You have species extinction. You have deforestation. In the time I've been talking to you, a few fields the size of 10 football pitches forest areas have been denuded. In that little time I've been talking to you. You look at the map of the Philippines pre-war, that is pre-1950, and now. Pre-1950 it was almost about 80% green. Now it's about 10% green. Forests are gone. We do work in Indonesia, and under total attack. I was flying into Singapore about 10 years ago, and once you're above, flying over 30,000 feet, the sky is clear. As you descend, you descend into a fog. I thought, this is funny. Fog in the tropics? But it wasn't. But people smoke, burning in Borneo, Kalimantan, burning forests. Cover the whole region in smoke. Why? They're burning the forest so they can plant palm, so that they can get biofuels to drive our cars, because they're the threat to, because the petrol industry is in decline, because they're pumping out, they're finding less fossil fuel resources than they're exploiting. That's by way of an introduction. I need to go over there and then show you some slides. We talk through this. I'll try and finish it as soon as possible. But I'd like to engage with you, you see. Having said it, I can't just go away without commenting and listen to what you have to say, because I'm talking about your futures, you see. What I do. All right. Here's the problem. So I'm asking the question. We have been through a process, call it industrial, call it economic, call it academic. We've been through a process of thought, and I'm asking the question: can the way we have, if we continue to think the way we have been thinking, can it really produce solutions to the problems that we ourselves have created? I say no. But if you have another view, please tell me. So the whole thing is based on, the whole of society today is based on what we call development and growth. and progress. And all this development and progress and increase in standards of living is based on industrial economic growth. Now I ask you, I have lived 70 years and 10, and in that time I have not seen the planet grow. Have you? The planet hasn't grown. But you see, we are taxing finite resources. And the whole economic system is geared to extracting these finite resources. So at what point is this going to stop? At what point is somebody going to say, we can't do this anymore because what Allah has put on this earth is limited, it's finite. So how can we go on having endless growth in this political model, this political economic model? Because the whole of society today, the democratic model, depends on you casting your vote to the party that promises the biggest, best deal in terms of your own standards of living. If a party says, if Cameron or Miliband said, look, I get the picture now, the environmental problem is really dire, and I'm worrying about, the talk that I'm talking, I'm worrying about my children, because we need to really leave something behind. So we need to start now, and in the next election, I'm going to work towards reducing our living standards, tightening our belts a little bit, very gradually. Will you vote for that person? You won't. You will vote for the person who promises you a better life. You see, that's the way it's built. So, what I'm saying is, development and progress equals destruction and pollution. That's a good debating point there. Let's go into a little bit more detail. And only a little bit. Right, what's the Brundtland report about? Any environmentalists, what's the Brundtland report about? Brundtland? Renewables? Right. It's about sustainability. They're about sustainable development. So Brundtland coined up the idea of sustainable development. And the idea that, yes, we can continue to progress and develop, but if we do it sustainably, it is possible. I've been to so many conferences which talk about sustainable development, but I tell you, they haven't found any answers to it. They haven't. Who is going to sustain what? Who is dependent on sustainable development? Then in 2005, the United Nations Millennium Ecosystem Assessment warns that human resource needs are growing exponentially. 60% of the world's ecosystem services are being degraded. In 2007, the UNEP Global Environmental Outlook says humans are living beyond their means. In 2009, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change says climate change may bring abrupt and irreversible changes. Yep. In 2008, the United Nations Development Policy Analysis Division warns that the world economy is teetering on the brink of severe economic downturn. Right? That the deepening credit crisis, which you all must be familiar with. And there is a slowdown in the growth of global economy. Right? That's a 2008 report. Now, at the same time, it urges the need for aggressive and coordinated expansionary policy. So on the one hand, you get the environmental lobby saying, be careful, 2009 report, abrupt and irreversible change. On the other hand, these people are saying need for aggressive and coordinated expansionary policies. So we're challenging the mindset. Harvard biologist, in a paper he wrote in 1962, the human species is an environmental abnormality. Famous Harvard, he said, never before in human history has human beings tried to commit suicide through a rational process of thinking. Paleontologist talks about damage is grown to make our aggression terminal, not dangerous. Futurist Alvin Toffler, the most brilliant scientists alive today, don't know where science is taking us. Humans reduced to a standing reserve for technology. Martin Heidegger, existentialist philosopher. This is a bit complicated. I don't want to go too far, too deep into this, except to say that society is growing exponentially. That's doubling every few years. And we, in fact, link that to the creation of the banking system in the 16th century, when Henry VIII took an interest-based loan, and the Christian community made it permissible for the monarchs to take loans. And what I'm really saying here is that there is a amazing coincidence by the growth of economic activity and the degradation of the environment related to rebirth. Now I come to the Islamic bit. I wanted, essentially, you see, where I'm coming from, we need to make these links. We are not living in an isolated society. You need to understand, if you are saying Rasulullah said this or the Quran says that, then you need to make that a real and positive interface in what's happening to society today. Otherwise it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I happen to visit Leeds now and again, and I was here for Christmas, and I heard a talk of Daras in the Grand Mosque by Dr. Rani, and he was saying, what is the point in all this knowledge? What is the point in all this knowledge if we do not activate it? You see, so we are filled with knowledge, hoping that when our time comes and Yawm al-Akhirah comes, that Allah is going to favor us with the knowledge in our heads. Of course He isn't. The Sunnah is about practice. It is about practice. It is about doing. And about changing yourself, and then changing the circumstances that affect your immediate surroundings, and then, inshallah, if it is possible for you, change the wider situation. That is up to you. So what I'm saying to you is, if you already have knowledge in your heads, I'm sure you have, then use it. Because time is short. And when we started this work 25 years ago, there was no such thing as Islamic environmentalism. I'll come to that in a minute. And in a sense, you don't need it. You don't need it because if you follow the Sunnah of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that is environmentalism. There was no need for a topic of fiqh such as Islamic environmentalism in Islam. There was no need for it, because that was epitomized. If I said that, then that's all I can sit down. That's all you need to know, because Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was, I say, an environmentalist, because there was no need for any Muslim to be an environmentalist, because that is the way it was, and you just follow the Sunnah. But what happened? What happened was then, as the debate heated up, talk about global warming, and people were searching for this kind of knowledge, we have to devise a method in which to get people to understand what is really going on. And when I went to the ulama and said to them, you know, what does the Quran say about the environment, this and that and the other? One ulama said to me, oh, forget it, brother, this is nature worship. And another one said to me, this is their problem, let them solve it. Their problem? Who's there? The West. But we are part of the West. We are here. We are enjoying the positives and the negatives of the West. We contribute positively and negatively to the society we live in. We breathe the air we produce and everybody else produces. We are part of this society. As I said earlier on, we are part of the problem. We can be also part of the solution. We cannot detach us and say, oh, the West is over there and we are over there. We are not. And you can see that globally. It's one system today. Globalization, the global economic order. So there are no lines on the maps. There are no maps. What we do here today affects somebody in Australia. If somebody plants a tree in the Philippines, which is a predominantly Catholic country, we will probably benefit here. Or somebody in Sub-Saharan Africa might benefit. If they destroy all the forests in Sub-Saharan Africa, not only will the people locally feel that there will be no fuel for them, but the rest of the world will feel it too. Because everything is interconnected. So what we have to do, what we needed to do then is to, the ulama weren't going to help me. So quite late in life, I went to university and I did a master's in Quran and the environment. And I discovered there were nearly 260 verses in the Quran which talks about khalq, based on the root khalaqa, khalq, creation, khalaq, to create, khaliq, creator. Nearly 260 verses. And you look at those verses, they tell you much of what you know about the environment and your environmental responsibility. You see? So the Quran is inherently environmental. There are no two words about it. Quran is environmental because it starts with Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. That's the beginning. Allah created. So we call that the unity principle, based on Qul huwallahu ahad. Fitra, the principle of the natural state. It's in Surah Rum 30. Fitratallahi allati fatara an-nasi alayh. Allah originated you in His original creation. A beautiful explanation. You call this deep ecology. You don't need to know deep ecology. You only need to know the surah. What does it mean? It means that the earth is the womb of Allah's creation and we were put in that. And we are part of it. And we were integrated in it. Now we are disintegrated in it. Or we are disintegrating in it. So we are very much part of that. You call it I call it the principle of primordiality. That we are part of that essential system. فطرة الله التي فطر الناس عليه ذلك الدين القيم ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. See? ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون. Allah tells you that you do not understand. He tells you and you do not understand. That refrain, that's a common refrain in the Quran. Mizan, the balance principle, everything. Ar-Rahman allama al-Quran, khalaqa al-insan allamahu al-bayan, ash-shamsu wal-qamaru bi-husban, an-najmu wash-shajaru yasjudan, was-samaa'a rafa'a wa wada'a al-mizan. Allah tadaffa with me. He created everything in balance. The world functions because it's in balance. Khalifa, the responsibility principle. We are stewards, we are guardians of Allah's creation. Again, I'll go through this very quickly so we can have some discussion. Moderation and simplicity, iqtisad, mizan, balance, social justice, moderation in consumption. La tabdila lil khalqillah. You will not change Allah's creation. And Allah says in Quran, there has to be moderation in consumption. Natural resources are shared equally by all, and there's care for the environment. This is again, the accumulation of wealth is discouraged. Fierce competition for wealth distracted. Al-Hakim al-Takalim. Those who compete in doing good things are among the righteous. We were talking about economics. Giving and sharing encouraged. Hoarding is discouraged. There is zakat, there is sadaqah. There's anfaq. The deprived have a right over the surplus wealth of others. Helping others, the Surah Al-Ma'un. Have you seen him who denies his faith? أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ. Yeah, we're talking about, we are going into a wider area of discussion here because we have spoken about this. I think I will make a connection between. So Islam has a comprehensive package. You see, there is a comprehensive package, a comprehensive way of dealing with society today. And there is also, in the development of our work, there are also environmental zones that we could put together, like the HEMA system. The special reserves may be established by the state for use as conservation zones. There are special zones for the protection of water. So there is, in a sense, although it's not embodied as a body of fiqh, if you look hard enough, there are teachings, there are practices of the Sunnah that you can, in fact, which we have used in the past. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So this approach is mainly localization. It will not work at the nation-state level because it is about nation-state level. It's about increasing production, increasing growth, standards of living, and so on. Now, the example of the Prophet ﷺ. As I said, the entire Sunnah is sufficient. The Sunnah is a manifestation of the Rasul ﷺ and his practice in terms of the environment. Again, you see, I hesitate to use this language because the whole problem of what we call environmental degradation is new. So in the kind of society we work in, now we have degrees about environment, we have huge government departments dealing with this, and you have non-governmental organizations, you have my organization doing this kind of thing, because this is an entirely new thing. Rachel Carson wrote a book called Silent Spring in 1962. Before she wrote, she made a connection between the toxic chemicals we use for agriculture, pesticides, and the fact that Silent Spring, what that means is that when she went out, usually there are birds and bees flying, there's nothing. And she found out that the toxic chemicals on the ground, the pesticides, were killing off the insects and the fauna that lives in the soil. And the birds were not there because they had nothing to feed. Or the birds get killed because of the toxic poisons. Silent Spring. That is what, in 1962, that is what started the environmental movement. And there were no degrees on environmentalism until the very late 19th century, the 1980s. It was a very new thing, you see. But in Islam, You don't talk about the environment. You are a natural environmentalist without even talking about it, if you follow the Sunnah of Rasul. And hadith I heard the other day, for me, epitomizes the whole thing. And the hadith went like a very short one. One of the Sahaba said to Rasul, Ya Rasul, I love you. And he turned his head, he didn't say anything. And the Sahaba said it again, Ya Rasul, I love you. Turned his head, he didn't say anything. He said it a third time. The Rasul responded by saying, if you love me, what I can give you most is poverty. Poverty is my glory. You see? Now, that is what the people who love the Rasul aspire to as well. That is what you want, the road that you want to go down to. But of course, because he epitomizes the apex of human behavior, that is what we aspire to. The rest of us are further down. So we aspire to the good things in life. And the Quran deals with it. It does not deny you. The Quran says, La yuhibbul musrifin. Allah does not love the wasters. Which means that Allah allows you to consume. It says in the Quran, wear your best apparel. There is abundance that I have created for you. But La yuhibbul musrifin. Allah does not love wasters. Have what's enough for you, and then leave the rest for others. It's a hugely wasteful society. And then there is a verse in the Quran which talks about fasad. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر بما كسبت أيدي الناس. There is corruption has been created in the land and sea by your own hands. No, move away from it so that you can learn those lessons, and Allah will have mercy on you. You see? So, the goods of this world are not denied for you, not denied for us. We can have it. But there is in all this, there is moderation, there is nizam, there is balance. And the way that Rasulullah used water when he did wudu, when he did ghusl. He never wasted water. And the hadith about trees. If you cut one tree down, plant 2 trees. And if you plant a tree, or 2 trees or more trees, the sadaqah would be a few years from now, because your children will benefit by that. And numerous hadiths. And seemingly unconnected hadiths about how you treat a guest and how you relate to your family. All these things are, in a sense, in the wider sense, related to the environment, how you live in this society. So I've given you, and what I've been trying to do is to try to paint a background of what is really going on. I'm trying to overlay the Islamic approach to this and say, and the best example. I have come to the conclusion, I did a lot of work in trying to produce these 4 principles that I've showed you earlier on. And we produced teaching material, and we've turned this teaching material into training programs, and we moved on from training programs to creating facts on the ground. So these are not things that remain in the 4 pages of the Quran, 2 covers of the Quran. They are existential, they manifest themselves in your action. And we've tried to respond, to replicate that. The knowledge, the ilm of the Quran, and the practice of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So the knowledge, turn it into teaching material, turn it into training material, turn it into projects where people will benefit. And one of our most famous projects is the one based in Zanzibar. As a result of which, we got called in the back end of the 1990s by an international NGO, who WWF and Conservation International in the United States. They're saying, I got a phone call saying we have problems where fishermen in Zanzibar are dynamiting coral reefs. We can't stop them. They're all Muslims, but we don't know what to do. And you know something? What they didn't do in 3 years, we did in 24 hours. Just by presenting this idea, just by presenting these ideas to the ordinary fishermen and the local islands, they stopped. You know the reason? They said there are two reasons. One is Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wouldn't do it, and the other is if we are Allah's Khalifa, we cannot. We can disobey the local laws, but we cannot disobey Allah's law. And they changed. To the extent that 2 years later we had American film crews coming and filming it. The whole project as part of a series of marine conservation. You can do it. You can do it. We can do it. But at this moment in time, we are a lone voice. This is difficult for me to take. You see, we are recognized by international NGOs. We are being called up, but we have a huge problem in at least surviving. The ulama that we train, one of the things they said is, "Oh, Brother Khalid, can you please produce a booklet?" Here it is. Teacher's Guide for Islamic Environmental Education. Entire booklet based on Quran and the Sunnah. I don't have any copies. I'm going to leave it out there for you to have a look at. The whole thing is based on Quran. And at the current moment, we are running a project in Sumatra called Islamic Environmental Ethics and Sumatran Forest Management. We are collaborating with the University of Kent. We did exactly the same workshop. And in 24 hours, and who am I talking to? Knowledgeable ulama. And they're saying, well, thank you, brother. We get the picture. We're just making those connections. That is, it's not that they're lacking in knowledge. People out there have a huge amount of knowledge. You're just making a dent, and it gushes out, and you make the connections. And you don't have to worry. You go away, and they do it. You see, and you talk the language of the Sunnah. You talk the language of the Quran, and you're onto a winner. I'm emphasizing this, particularly, I say this when I sit down, because today you need, as Muslims, we need good news. I'm telling you that this is good news. We have developed a technique. We are sitting on the edge of something, and until somebody comes and funds us, we can go to an area and set up a community development project based on Islamic natural resources management and solve the food security of the area. We can do it practically. We don't respond to emergency relief like Islamic relief and Muslim hands and Muslim aid and people like that. They are great, they are doing good work, but we are into something else. We are into creating self-sufficiency based on the Quran and the practice of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And strangely, the people who I get the most telephone call contacts are the non-Muslim organizations. If not for the funding of the non-Muslim organizations, we wouldn't be here. That is the paradox. Because I'm saying to you that again I repeat, as Muslims, we need to give good news out there. And this is it. If there is something else, please tell me, I'd like to know. In a very practical way, quickly. It can be done. We can change. We can deal with global warming. We can deal with poverty through very practical action. And it's rooted in alternative technology. It's rooted in the current cutting-edge analysis, and it's also no question about it, it's deeply rooted in Islam and the practice of Islam. If you have been, thanks for listening.
I'd like to move to questions. Any other questions? Come on, guys, finish with other questions.
You didn't really. I agree with everything you were saying. I think I'm very interested in how the Islamic faith can be put towards the issues that we're facing. You didn't mention at all the problem of, or the fundamental underlying problem of population and population growth, and the need to deal with that directly. And as that is one of the major issues, I was wondering what your stance is, or what the faith, how that would apply to how you can say it.
Good point. Yeah. Well, it is an issue. It's a big issue. There are 2 or 3 ways of looking at it. The first point I would like to make on this is that if you are looking at it from the point of vast majority, what swathes of human population not having enough to eat, and as a result of which, they are looking at, say for example, in Nigeria, poverty. They don't have access to gas or electricity or whatever. And how do they cook? Fuel wood. Where do they get the fuel wood from? Forest. Almost every day they could cook, they could go to the forest and come to the depletion of resources. The point I want to make here is that 80% of the world's resources are being consumed by 20% of the population living in the developed countries. If you reverse that, you will say that 80% of the world's population living in poverty only can consume 20%. So, if you want to change that, at that level, if you want to change that, people living in the high consuming countries then need to look at degrowth or negative growth as an issue, or put it another way, we, all of us, need to tighten our belts so that the rest of the world can loosen theirs a little bit. So that's one way. People won't do that. They'll go looking for life on one of the moons of Jupiter. You see what I'm getting at? Okay, the other thing is, there is a case for reducing population growth. I say that because more people you have, the more they tax the environment, and people are trying. I don't know what to do about this. Some Muslim countries support population control. Some Muslim countries don't, for religious reasons. There's another huge debate going on. So the scenario is that by 2050, population growth will stable at about 9 billion, I'm told. And then until that time, we have to deal with population growth and environmental degradation at the same time. There are no easy answers to this one. But there's another very interesting scenario, almost a very alarmist one, and it's related to environmental issues. And this was that I read a report which was largely ignored by a Guardian reporter during the Copenhagen, it was COP15 in Copenhagen in 2009. He said he was with a few German technocrats, and they were talking about highly expensive construction of nuclear reactors for electricity, generating electricity. And they were arguing that there'd be no point in constructing nuclear reactors that are going to last a long, 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 long time, because in the next 100 years there'll be a huge population decline as a result of climate change. And the decline, after having risen to 9 billion, is going to decline, after having risen to 9 billion in 2050, is going to decline, now wait for it, to 1 billion by 2100, 2100. Now that's alarmist. Now they couldn't put that out publicly because, you know, that there's nowhere people can run for shelter, a figure like that. So they didn't know, the German government didn't know how to deal with this, except to say by 2025 we are going to begin to decommission, gradually decommission the nuclear reactors. That policy wasn't overtly articulated. What happened was then, last year, January last year I think, we had the tsunami in Japan. And you get these very sensible Japanese people who are selling nuclear reactors. Oh, what was an earthquake zone? I don't understand that. And then we had Fukushima. Yeah, Fukushima ring bells, you must do. They never stopped hearing about it. Now Fukushima reactor disintegrated. Now the Germans used the Fukushima thing to say we are going to decommission by 2050 instead of spelling out the other scenario. You see. But the Indians want to build nuclear reactors, they want to progress. By the way, the Chinese are building one coal-fired power station every week. Anyway, it's a difficult question. There are so many nuances to it, and hopefully, we will find the answers before the answer comes to us in a very drastic fashion.
You talk about the equation about development plus progress is equal to destruction plus pollution. I see it in the way that development plus destruction is equal to progress plus pollution. I don't see it like advantage equal disadvantage. I see it advantage with disadvantage equals to advantage plus disadvantage. So I don't know what you say. What did you say about this? I see it like that because even Allah and the Prophet, they know that everything we do, it has advantages and disadvantages. And Allah knows that whatever we will do, we have the knowledge, but at the same time, we don't have the full knowledge. So we won't be perfect in that. We will have, I think you understood my point.
Yeah, I do.
My second point is, do we blame the West and Europe? I come from outside the Europe, but at the same time, do we blame them that they reached to a place where they're thinking about the lives of on Mars or whatever, or we have to teach the people in the Middle East, for example, that no, you have to be like that. So, shall we blame them about because they are developed to reach this point of thinking of not only thinking about anyways,
I understand.
my point is
I understand your question.
I think what the ones we have to blame is the Middle East because they're not taking care of the people who. We should blame Islam. We should blame Muslims because for example, Saudi Arabia, they have the power, they have the money, and they're thinking of the economic growth, but at the same time, they're not thinking about the people who are dying.
Okay. All right. Let me answer your first question. What I would suggest here is that you're entitled to that view. You're saying that progress will, you're for progress and you are willing to suffer a certain amount of pollution in order to progress. If you're saying that. But that's been the whole story. You know, let's pollute now and once we progress, we'll clean up. It'll be too late by then. What I would suggest is that you look up the Club of Rome, write this down, the Club of Rome, and look up a book called Limits to Growth. Limits to growth. And there is an idea called, any mathematicians here, exponential growth. You're a mathematician?
Yeah.
You know about exponential growth? Yeah. That's what's happening now. It's exponential. And there is no stopping it. It's a doubling effect. So, there's another organization called the Earth Center, Earth Care. But Limits to Growth, Club of Rome, Google will help you there. That'll give you the answer that you're looking for. Because it just will not happen. You see. And I will point out to you, once you've gone too far, we will all be like Greece. We'll all be like Greece. We are in the UK. People say we are not so far away from it. And I will suggest you, but you know, every single man, woman, and child in this country, I think us as well, is in debt to the tune of £16,000. Every single man, that's the national debt. So we have to get into debt in order to have growth. Anyway, that's another scenario. So look up exponential growth and look up limits to growth. That'll give you the answers. Earth scan. Look up Earth scan as well. Now the thing about the Middle Eastern countries, where there's a lot of oil wealth, yeah, I have argued, and it will continue to be argued, and people may disagree, but the Middle Eastern countries have, in a sense, in terms of the globalized world, have, in a sense, missed the boat. Missed the boat in the sense that instead of, or in addition to plowing back all the oil wealth that they'd benefited from back into their own countries and building huge infrastructures and trying to build an industrial model similar to that of the West in their own countries, they have in fact missed the boat. They could have gone down another road. They could have gone down another developmental route where you're talking about poverty alleviation and look at these issues. You see, but I also have to say that they will in fact argue that they have also been, in terms of, they're also enormously generous people. I think if the statistics were to come out per capita, the Middle Eastern countries spend more money on poverty than the Western countries per capita. They do, and that's a fact. But this does not absolve them from their own responsibilities. Bahrain had a Formula 1 racing circuit. Abu Dhabi has a Formula 1 racing circuit. Dubai has a ski slope built in the center of Dubai. It also has building islands, artificial islands on the sand, and building a skyscraper 1 mile high on one of these islands. Not really realizing that possibly in 50 years, its first 10 floors will be underwater, possibly, because the global warming will have melted the ice and there will be rising sea levels. Extremely short-sighted. And if they have been willing to give us a little hearing about what can be done with their wealth in order to alleviate poverty in a very practical, positive way from an Islamic framework, you see, they could have had some, but they're not willing to go down that route. They say, yeah, so we are being generous. They have the Red Crescent Society, which is part of Red Cross, and a huge amount of money spent by Red Cross comes from the Muslim world as well. We need to put all these into the equation. But also, in the introduction I said, we are all part of a globalized system where the oil production is part of that globalized system, and where the production of oil production comes back to the oil countries, and this wealth that comes back is then recycled back into the industries of the West. Everything is interlocked. You can't get out of it. I happen to know somebody who is an advisor in the one of the Emirates investment agencies. In all these oil countries, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Emirates, they all have huge investment in the West. Many of the big hotels in London, many of the big parts of New York are owned by these investment companies. You see, they all also gain, but they also suffer with the financial meltdown. And if the whole thing goes down, they will go down with it. You see, but I take your point that the oil wealth, if you are saying that the oil wealth could be better produced, better utilized to alleviate poverty in various parts of the world, I agree with you totally. But you also need to recognize they are locked into a globalized model which is not of their making, in which they are entrenched in that model, and they have to do, their orders come from somewhere else.
So you think this is the problem?
Sorry?
You think this is the problem? What's the solution for that? Is it a lack of knowledge, or is it a lack of proper leadership, or is it...
Lack of knowledge, lack of proper leadership, lack of a vision. Lack of, I would say, an Islamic vision, I would say, from where I'm coming from.
So do you think giving them this knowledge will solve the problem? Or
no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. If we have to make these people, they need to feel that they can do something positive with this knowledge.
But they are the root of the solution. I think they are the root of the solution.
Yes.
For this problem.
Yes.
So our efforts will be directed to them.
Inshallah.
So,
If you know anybody, let me know. I'm willing to go and speak to them.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that talk. I'm an academic, and I did a lot of climate change work when it was in its infancy back, about 13, 14 years ago. I used to do a lot of climate change impacts assessment. And about 13 years down the line, I've sort of become a bit disgruntled with the whole scientific community, with the way they say they can predict the future up to 100 years from now. And I'm focusing more on the adaptation side. I've got a question about education, and you talked a bit about education. One of my roles at the moment, Leeds University, I get lots of inquiries from PhD potential students from abroad, overseas, especially Muslim countries, who want to come to the West, to the UK, to Leeds University and learn about environmental management. And it's a struggle finding the funding. They're really enthusiastic. Based on what you've said, is it true to say they should have second thoughts before they come and want to learn about environmental management?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the solution to that? How would I go about approaching that issue?
You see, if environmental management is locked into the economic paradigm of the world capitalist model, then it's a no-brainer. You see, I mean, if you're an environmentalist, I mean, they function in different compartments. You see, I think you don't. It's not rocket science to come to the conclusion that it's the economic growth model that is contributing to the degradation of the environment. And if the economists are not willing to talk to the environmentalists and vice versa, you're not going to go anywhere. You see, so you need to look at is this an interdisciplinary? Now there is something germinating called the environmental economics. You see, but environmental economics is also part of the growth model. You see, it is not about. It's not about tightening your belts. It's not about something more stable. It's about giving people more of the goodies. You see, And with population increase, there'll be greater demand on the finite resources of the planet, which means there's going to be more global warming. So, I mean, frankly, I would say to them, students, don't waste your money. You know, I would say, look at, although I'm a great sustainability skeptic, I would say, look at that model and look, the model is localization, not globalization. It's localization because, you know, as somebody in the environment, the whole aspect of food miles. The lies by food miles. I mean, where do my beans come from? From farms in Tanzania. Well, I could grow beans in my backyard. You see, so by the time I had my beans on my plate, and you like contribute enormously, its fair share of global warming. So, I mean, what I would say to these people is, look at, again, to sustainability in the absence of anything else, look at how you can sustain local production, local transport, localized markets, you see, and you've begun to solve the problem. And it's all there in the Sunnah, as I said, it's there, it's all there, the knowledge is there. It's not, it's, in a sense, not rocket science. And okay, I'm not in that sense a Luddite. You know who the Luddites are? You know who the Luddites are? Luddites are the people who are against industrial progress in the 19th century, and they destroyed all the machines because they say we're not getting work, so we destroy them. I'm not that. I'm not against technology. Although you need to bear in mind, as Heidegger said, that technology controls you. You don't control technology. Bear that in mind. We are a standing resource for technology. You want proof? Leave your mobile phones with me and then go home. You'll feel lost. It controls you. Don't. I digress. So the thing is, it can be done, and we need to look at things another way. The thinking that produced the problem can't solve it. You need another mindset. And for us as Muslims, we've discovered something that's quite fantastic. You can do it. See, and I'm not in that sense against progress. That's the way human beings are made. What I'm saying is progress in a way that is manageable, that you don't destroy. You see, and in your term as an environmentalist, and you know what I'm talking about. Reduce full mile localization is the answer. And if you can, it's a huge task. But the point is that if we don't do it, then nobody else is going to do it. We'll be talking about it. 10 years from now, somebody else will come and talk about Islam and environment. By the time it will be too late. You couldn't do it. Now, in fact, if you want to try an experiment, learn about the HEMA. The HEMA is a system of environmental protection. If you have back gardens, create your back garden into a HEMA. And see what comes out of that. It can be done. It can be done now, locally. Plant food you can eat. It can be done most parts of the year. Don't use pesticide. Don't use commercial, fertilizer. Organic. Learn about permaculture. Permaculture is a new technique. I'm not against new techniques of managing your land. Grow your own food. Otherwise, it is going to be too late. Localization.
I think one last question.
It seems that the vicious circle that we're in is that our fellows are not sacrificing their pleasures to do this. So if the way things are looking, we are on a slope that is going towards, and it's we're not going to cut our emissions by 2017 so that we don't stock. So it's very hard to then not give yourself what is there because of and disadvantage your minute part of existence to, and then see everybody else who's not thinking, not caring, do exactly. But I guess that is what you can get from your decision.
But if we talk the language of the Sunnah of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you see, and again, of course, you have these, and this is what I'm supposed to be here for. Again, I said, it's a blanket thing. You see, that is the secret. The Sunnah is a secret. There is a hadith which says that even if you think, it says, Yawm al-Akhirah, the last day on earth, and you have a seed or a sapling in your hand, you plant it. So for 2017, I'll plant a tree. If I live that long, I don't know, after 2017, I'll plant it. Why? Because it is a manifestation of optimism, belief in the Sunnah of Rasul, and a determination. It's everything. So I say, this is not a message of gloom and doom. I say this is a message of hope, because in the Sunnah you have the answer. So in a sense, don't you have to worry about it. You've got to think about it. That's why you're here. You've got to be conscious of what is going on. But as these things go on, then you know that if you follow Sunnah, that you have hope. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I think there's a hadith to the extent of the Prophet ﷺ that, to the extent that, to the nearest meaning that, do not abuse the use of water, even if you are at the banks of a river. So, meaning that, use only that much of the water. I mean, you've got the whole, river or sea or ocean in front of you, but use only that amount of water that you need. And it's just sort of like it just seemed ironical to me just when I was sitting here, and in front of us, here, we've got 4 clocks when you only need one, and it's these things that we don't really think about, and, maybe because, we are living in a consumerist society, or because, we don't think about these things, and because of that reason, we're just going beyond our means unnecessarily. It's not really going to benefit anymore, but we don't seem to, in a way, not that we don't care, but we don't seem to have that knowledge really, that sense really, that, just to use, not to go beyond our means, because it really won't benefit us anymore.
There's another version of that hadith actually, slightly variant, in that a Sahaba did wudu in a vessel, and the surplus water he threw away. The Rasul chided him. Why did he do that? There's water left over, throw it back into the river. You see, it's like that kind of teaching. So what I'm saying is that the background scenario may not be encouraging to you, but I think as Muslims we need to bear 2 things in mind. That there is hope until that tree, if it's going to end tomorrow, you plant it, there's hope. And there's also the other aspect, that in this day and age, that there is something that is positive, that is profoundly valuable, that we can put out there, that the good news of Islam, in the sense that we can, by doing things ourselves, not pointing our fingers at other people, by doing things ourselves, change the circumstances in the places we live in, and from that, use that as an example for others. Say, if you succeed, then look at us. And that's what happened in Zanzibar in a sense.
Thank you for listening.